Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of Earth's Hope and watched the massive space station grow larger on the main screen. Nexus Station was bigger than anything humans had ever built. It looked like a giant metal city floating in space with lights that sparkled like stars. Jake had never seen anything so beautiful or so scary at the same time. Ambassador Lisa Harper walked up beside him. She wore her best uniform and had a big smile on her face. Lisa had worked for years to make this moment happen. She was the one who answered the first message from the Galaxy Council 3 months ago. The message had been simple but amazing. It said that Earth was ready to join the galactic community. "This is it, Jake," Lisa said while fixing her hair one more time. "Today, humans become citizens of the galaxy. We will have friends among the stars and technology beyond our dreams." Dr. Carl Bennett looked up from his tablet where he was reading about the different alien species they would meet. Carl was excited to study new forms of life, but he was also nervous. Everything was happening so fast. Just 3 months ago, humans thought they were alone in the universe. Now they were about to meet 12 different alien species that had been working together for thousands of years. Colonel Steve Adams checked his weapon one more time, even though he knew he would not need it today. Steve was a soldier, and soldiers always prepared for trouble. But Lisa had made it clear that this was a peaceful mission. The Galaxy Council wanted to welcome humanity, not fight them. Still, Steve felt better when his weapon was ready. Lieutenant Amy Foster sat at her station, monitoring all the radio signals coming from the space station. Amy was the best communications officer in the human fleet. She could speak 6 different languages and understand radio signals that other people missed. Right now, she was listening to dozens of alien voices, talking in languages she had never heard before. "Captain, we are getting a welcome message from the station," Amy said while putting on her headphones. "They want us to dock at Port 7. They say the council is waiting for us." Jake nodded and gave orders to his crew. Earth's Hope slowly moved toward the docking port. As they got closer, Jake could see alien ships everywhere. Some were long and thin like needles. Others were round like balls. A few looked like they were made of crystal and seemed to glow from inside. "Look at all those ships," Carl said with wonder in his voice. "Each one must come from a different world. Think of all the knowledge we could learn from them." The docking was smooth and quiet. Jake felt the small bump as their ship connected to the station. Now there was no going back. In a few minutes, humans would meet aliens for the first time in history. Lisa gathered her team at the airlock. Besides Jake, Carl, and Steve, she had brought 6 other experts. Each person had a job to do during the meeting. Jake would observe and protect the group. Carl would study the aliens and their technology. Steve would watch for any dangers. Amy would handle all communications. "Remember everyone," Lisa said before they opened the door. "We represent all of humanity today. Be polite, be respectful, and follow my lead. This is the most important day in human history." The airlock opened with a soft hiss. Beyond it was a corridor that glowed with soft blue light. The walls seemed to be made of some kind of metal that changed color as they walked. Jake had never seen anything like it on Earth. They walked for several minutes before reaching a huge chamber. The ceiling was so high that Jake could barely see it. In the center of the room was a circle of 12 tears. 11 of them were filled with the strangest creatures Jake had ever seen. One alien looked almost human but had blue skin and silver hair. Another was covered in scales like a snake but stood on 2 legs like a man. A third had fur all over its body and eyes that glowed red in the dim light. Jake tried not to stare, but it was hard not to look at each amazing creature. The blue-skinned alien stood up and walked toward them. When it spoke, its voice was smooth and musical like a song. "Welcome humans to the Galaxy Council. I am High Chancellor Veltar of the Zephyrian people. We have waited long for this day." Lisa stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Thank you, Chancellor." "Veltar. I am Ambassador Lisa Harper, representing Earth and all humanity. We are honored to be here." Another alien stood up. This one was much bigger and looked more dangerous. It had thick armor covering its body and carried what looked like weapons. When it spoke, its voice was deep and rough. I am War Master Thekanon of the Corvan Empire. Your species shows promise, human. We have watched your wars and your courage. You may be worthy of joining us, Carl whispered to Jake. Did you hear that? They have been watching us. They know about our history. The next few hours were filled with speeches and presentations. Each alien species told humans about their worlds and their cultures. They showed pictures of beautiful cities and amazing technology. They talked about medicine that could cure any disease and ships that could travel faster than light. All of this can be yours, Chancellor Veltar explained. The Galaxy Council protects its members and shares its knowledge. You will have peace and prosperity beyond your imagination. Lisa was so excited she could barely contain herself. This was everything she had hoped for and more. But Amy was getting worried. She had been listening to radio signals all day and something did not feel right. During a break in the meeting, Amy pulled Jake aside. Captain, I need to show you something, she said quietly. I have been monitoring the alien communications and there are some strange signals. What kind of signals? Jake asked. Encrypted messages between their ships. Very advanced encryption that I can barely detect. Why would they need secret messages during a peaceful welcome ceremony? Jake looked around at the aliens who were talking and laughing with the human delegation. Everything seemed friendly and normal. Maybe Amy was being too careful. Keep monitoring Amy, but do not worry the ambassador too much. This is too important to mess up with suspicions. The ceremony continued with Chancellor Veltar presenting humanity with the Galaxy Council Charter. It was a beautiful document made of some kind of material that seemed to glow. Lisa signed it with great ceremony while cameras recorded everything for Earth. Welcome humans to the galactic community, Veltar announced. You are now under the protection and guidance of the Galaxy Council. Everyone cheered and clapped. Lisa had tears in her eyes. Carl was already asking questions about alien technology. Steve relaxed for the first time all day, but Amy kept listening to those encrypted signals, and the more she heard, the more worried she became. Something was very wrong, but she could not figure out what it was. Carl Bennett could not sleep that night. His room on Nexus Station was comfortable and quiet, but his mind was too busy. The aliens had given him boxes of medical equipment to study. They said it was a gift to help humanity cure diseases and live longer lives. Carl opened the first box and found devices that looked like nothing he had ever seen. They were smooth and silver with no buttons or screens. When he touched one, it started to glow and made a soft humming sound. According to the instruction files, the device could repair damaged cells and even regrow lost limbs. This is incredible, Carl said to himself as he scanned the device with his equipment. But as he looked deeper into how it worked, he found something strange. Hidden inside the medical programs were other codes that he did not understand. Carl spent hours trying to figure out what the hidden codes did. When he finally broke through the encryption, he felt sick to his stomach. The codes were designed to change human brain chemistry. They would make people more calm and obedient. The medical devices were not just for healing. They were for controlling minds. Meanwhile, Amy Foster was still monitoring alien communications from her station on Earth's Hope. She had been listening all night, and the encrypted messages were getting more frequent. She finally managed to decode one of them, and what she read made her blood run cold. The message talked about Protocol 7 and developmental species integration. It mentioned removing human independence and installing council oversight on all human worlds. The aliens were not welcoming humanity as equals. They were planning to take over Earth. Amy knew she had to warn someone, but who would believe her? Ambassador Harper was so excited about the alliance that she would not listen to warnings. Colonel Adams might listen, but he was back on Earth. Captain Morrison was her best hope. Amy waited until the morning shift change and then went to find Jake. She found him in the station cafeteria eating breakfast with some of the alien diplomats. They were all laughing and seemed to be having a good time. Captain, I need to speak with you privately, Amy said, trying to keep her voice steady. Jake looked at her worried face and excused himself from the table. They walked to a quiet corner where no one could hear them. What is it, Amy? Sir, I decoded some of the alien messages. They are planning to invade Earth. This whole alliance is a trap. Jake stared at her for a long moment. Are you sure about this? Those are very serious accusations. I am certain, sir. Dr. Bennett found something too. The medical equipment they gave us has mind control programs hidden inside. Before Jake could respond, Carl appeared looking pale and frightened. Jake, we have a problem. Those medical devices are designed to control human minds. I have the proof right here on my tablet. Jake looked at both of them and made a decision. We need to warn Ambassador Harper right away, they found. Lisa in the main conference room preparing for another meeting with the council. When they told her what they had discovered, she looked at them like they were crazy. That is impossible, Lisa said, shaking her head. The council has been nothing but friendly and generous. You're both being paranoid. Lisa, please just look at the evidence, Carl said, holding out his tablet. The medical devices have hidden programs. I do not want to hear any more conspiracy theories, Lisa said firmly. We are going to proceed with the ceremony as planned. Security Chief Clark will escort you back to your quarters if you cannot control yourselves. Ryan Clark had been standing quietly in the corner. He was in charge of keeping the human delegation safe, but now he was not sure who the real threat was. Ryan looked at the evidence Carl showed him and his face went dark. Ambassador, this data looks real, Ryan said carefully. Maybe we should postpone the ceremony until we can investigate. Absolutely not, Lisa snapped. I will not let fear and suspicion destroy the greatest opportunity in human history. Jake realized that Lisa would not listen to reason. She wanted the alliance too much to see the truth. He made a difficult choice. Amy, I need you to send a coded message to Earth immediately. Warn them that something is wrong here. Amy nodded and hurried back to her station. She composed a message using a code that only Earth military would understand. The message was simple but urgent. Alliance is trap. Council planning invasion. Prepare defenses, but it was already too late. As Amy was sending her message, the aliens were moving their ships into position around Earth. Admiral Kate Sullivan was commanding the human defense fleet when her communications officer picked up Amy's transmission. Admiral, we are getting a priority message from Nexus Station, the officer said. It says the Alliance is a trap and we should prepare for invasion. Kate read the message and immediately ordered all ships to battle stations. But as she looked at her senses, she saw something that made her heart sink. The Council ships that had been escorting them suddenly dropped their peaceful appearance. Weapon ports opened and targeting systems came online. All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan. Kate broadcast on all frequencies. We are under attack. Repeat, we are under attack. Take evasive action. The battle was brutal and one-sided. The Council ships had weapons and shields far beyond human technology. Earth's fleet fought bravely, but they were completely outmatched. Ship after ship was destroyed or disabled. Kate watched in horror as her flagship was torn apart by alien energy weapons. She managed to get to an escape pod just before the ship exploded. Around her, the few surviving human ships were trying to escape, but most would not make it. Back on Nexus Station, the humans felt the vibrations of weapons fire through the station hull. Jake ran to the nearest window and saw the flashes of battle in the distance. Earth's fleet was being destroyed. What have you done? Jake shouted at Chancellor Veltar, who was watching the battle with calm satisfaction. We have done what is necessary, Veltar replied. Your species has potential, but you are too violent and unpredictable to be left free. Under our guidance, you will become productive members of galactic society. You mean slaves, Carl said with anger in his voice. We prefer the term developmental species, War Master Thekanon said with what might have been a smile. Do not worry. Human, your people will be much happier once we help them adjust their thinking. Ryan Clark reached for his weapon, but alien guards were already surrounding them. They carried devices that made his muscles freeze when they pointed them at him. Within minutes, all the humans were captured. Take them to the detention level, Veltar ordered. They will be returned to Earth once the integration process is complete. As they were led away, Jake saw Amy being dragged from her station. She had tried to send another warning, but the aliens had cut all communications to Earth. The last message from Earth had been Admiral Sullivan reporting that the Invasion fleet was in orbit and demanding surrender. Lisa Harper was not with the other prisoners. Jake wondered what had happened to her until he saw her standing beside Chancellor Veltar. She was wearing alien clothing and had a strange device attached to her neck. "Lisa, what are you doing?" Jake called out. Lisa looked at him with empty eyes. "I am sorry, Jake, but this is for the best. Humanity needs guidance and the Council will provide it. In time you will understand." Jake realized that Lisa had been working with the aliens all along. She had betrayed her own species for promises of power and long life. The device on her neck was probably controlling her mind, just like the medical equipment would control everyone on Earth. As the prison door closed behind them, Jake, Carl, Amy, and Ryan found themselves locked in a small room with no windows. They could hear the sounds of celebration coming from other parts of the station. The aliens were having a party to celebrate their victory over humanity. "What do we do now?" Amy asked quietly. Jake looked at his small group of survivors. Earth was conquered, their fleet was destroyed, and they were prisoners on an alien station. But humans had survived worse things before. They would find a way to fight back. "We survive," Jake said firmly. "And we find a way to free our people." 6 months had passed since the Council invasion, and Earth was a very different place. Colonel Steve Adams crouched behind a fallen tree in the Rocky Mountains and watched the alien patrol move through the valley below. The Council soldiers moved in perfect formation with their weapons ready and their sensors, scanning for any sign of human resistance. Steve had managed to escape from the main cities when the invasion began. While most humans were being herded into processing centers for their daily treatments, Steve had gathered other soldiers and civilians who refused to give up. They now lived in hidden caves and abandoned mines far from the alien patrols. The resistance was small, but it was growing. Every day more humans managed to escape from the cities and find their way to the mountain hideouts. They brought stories of what was happening to their families and friends. The Council was using their medical devices to slowly change human minds. People were becoming calm and obedient, but they were also losing their creativity and their will to fight. "Colonel, we have a problem," whispered Sandra Price as she crawled up beside Steve. Sandra was an engineer who had worked on spacecraft before the invasion. Now she spent her time trying to figure out how alien technology works so the resistance could fight back. "What is it, Sandra?" "The alien patrol has new scanning equipment. I think they might be able to detect our cave system. We need to move everyone to the backup location tonight." Steve nodded and signaled to his scouts. Moving 200 people through the mountains at night would be dangerous, but staying put would be suicide. The Council was getting better at finding resistance hideouts. Down in the cities, Governor General Zekmar sat in his office in Geneva and reviewed reports from across Earth. Zekmar was a Nexari administrator who specialized in managing conquered species. He was thin and pale, with large black eyes that seemed to see everything. The Council had put him in charge of Earth because he was very good at breaking the spirit of rebellious populations. "The integration process is proceeding well," Zekmar told his assistant while reading the daily reports. 90% of humans are now receiving regular treatments. Violent crime has dropped to almost zero and productivity is increasing. "What about the resistance groups?" his assistant asked. "They are a minor annoyance. A few thousand humans hiding in remote areas cannot threaten our control of billions. We will deal with them when it is convenient," but Zekmar worried about the resistance. Then he admitted humans were different from other species the Council had conquered. Most civilizations gave up fighting after a few months of occupation. Humans kept fighting even when they had no hope of winning. In the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, Captain Jake Morrison was planning the Resistance's next mission. Jake had escaped from Nexus Station with help from an unexpected ally. During the confusion of the invasion, a young alien named Nick Torres had helped Jake steal a small ship and escape to the outer system. Nick was an Altarian whose people had been conquered by the Council decades ago. His species looked almost human except for their golden skin and pointed ears. Nick had worked as a communications officer for the Council, but he secretly hated them for what they had done to his homeworld. The supply convoy will pass through this asteroid field in 2 days, Nick said while pointing at a star chart. If we can disable their escort ships, we might be able to capture some of their medical supplies. Why do we need their medical supplies? Asked Dr. Carl Bennett, who was working at a nearby table. Carl had also escaped from Nexus Station and was now trying to develop treatments for humans who had been exposed to Council mind control. Because I think I can reverse engineer the control compounds, Carl explained. If I can figure out how they work, I might be able to create an antidote. Jake looked around the small asteroid base they had built over the past months. 20 humans and a handful of alien allies lived here in converted mining tunnels. They had very little food and their equipment was old and broken. But they had something the Council did not expect: hope. The raid on the supply convoy went better than expected. Jake's small fleet of captured alien ships attacked the convoy while it was passing through a dense asteroid field. The Council escorts were caught by surprise, and 3 of them were destroyed before they could call for help. We got the medical supplies and something even better, Amy Foster reported when the raiders returned to base. Amy had become the Resistance's intelligence officer, and she was very good at finding useful information. What did you find? Jake asked. Complete files on Council operations throughout the galaxy. Jake, they have done this to dozens of species over the past 1,000 years. We are not the first civilization they have conquered. Carl studied the files late into the night. What he found made him both angry and hopeful. The Council always used the same methods when they conquered a new species. They would offer friendship. An alliance, then gradually take control through technology and treaties. But the files also showed something else. Jake, you need to see this, Carl said excitedly. According to these records, several species have successfully revolted against the Council. The Drakmari fought a 20-year war before they were finally defeated. The Vorthan managed to destroy an entire Council fleet before their homeworld was sterilized. That does not sound very hopeful, Jake replied. But it proves the Council can be beaten. They are not as powerful as they want us to believe. Meanwhile, on Earth, the Resistance was learning to fight back in other ways. Dr. Bennett had managed to smuggle his research data to Steve's mountain hideout, working in a hidden laboratory carved from solid rock. Sandra Price and her team were building devices that could protect humans from Council mind control. The neural shielding works, Sandra announced after testing her latest invention. Anyone wearing one of these devices will be immune to Council mental manipulation. Steve looked at the small metal headband Sandra had created. It did not look like much, but if it worked, it could change everything. How many can you make? With the materials we have, maybe 50. But if we could get more rare earth elements, I could make hundreds. Steve knew where to get those materials, but it would mean attacking a Council mining operation. The risk would be enormous, but they had no choice. The Resistance needed every advantage they could get. The attack on the mining facility was the Resistance's biggest operation yet. 200 fighters moved through the forest at night while alien patrols searched for them. Steve had divided his force into 3 groups that would attack from different directions. The battle was fierce but brief. The Council soldiers were not expecting such a large and well-coordinated attack. Within an hour, the humans had captured the facility and loaded trucks with the materials Sandra needed, but the victory came at a cost. 20 Resistance fighters were killed and many more were wounded. Worse, the Council now knew that the human Resistance was much larger and better organized than they had believed. Governor General, the attack on the mining facility was carried out by at least 200 humans. The Council military commander reported to Zekmar. This was not a small band of survivors. This was an organized military operation. Zekmar felt a chill of fear. Other species had never managed to organize effective resistance after 6 months of occupation. The humans were proving to be more dangerous than the Council had expected. Double the patrols and increase the frequency of treatments in all cities, Zekmar ordered. I want every human on this planet under our control within 30 days, but it was too late for that. Word of the successful attack spread quickly through the resistance networks. Humans in dozens of cities began to refuse their treatments and go into hiding. The Council had always won by breaking the spirit of conquered peoples, but human spirit was proving very hard to break. In space, Admiral Kate Sullivan was rebuilding the human fleet one ship at a time. She had survived the battle at Earth and spent months gathering other survivors. Hidden bases in the outer system provided shelter for the growing fleet of captured and rebuilt ships. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the asteroid belt," her communications officer reported. "Captain Morrison wants to coordinate a joint operation." Kate smiled for the first time in months. Jake Morrison was a good officer and a brave man. If he was planning something big, she wanted to be part of it. The message from Jake was simple but exciting. He had found the location of a major Council command base and he had a plan to attack it. But he would need help from every human ship in the system. "This is our chance," Kate told her officers. "We can show the Council that humanity will never give up fighting." The rescue mission began at dawn when Captain Jake Morrison's small fleet approached Nexus Station. The massive alien structure looked the same as it had 8 months ago, but now, Jake knew the truth about what happened inside those gleaming walls. Somewhere in the station, Amy Foster and the other human prisoners were waiting for rescue. Jake had spent weeks planning this operation with Admiral Kate Sullivan and Colonel Steve Adams. The plan was risky, but it was their best chance to strike back at the Council and free their people. More importantly, Nick Torres had discovered something that could change the war. "Remember everyone," Jake said over the radio to his pilots. "We need to get in fast, grab our people, and get out before their main fleet arrives. This is not about winning a battle. This is about saving lives." The attack began with Admiral Sullivan's ships creating a massive distraction on the far side of the system. Her fleet attacked a Council supply depot while broadcasting fake communications about a major human offensive. The Council commanders took the bait and sent most of their ships to deal with the threat. While the Council was distracted, Jake's team approached Nexus Station using captured alien ships and false identification codes. Nick Torres had programmed their computers to make them look like returning Council vessels. The deception worked perfectly and they were allowed to dock without question. Colonel Adams led the assault team through the station corridors. Each soldier wore one of Sandra Price's neural shielding devices, which protected them from Council mental manipulation weapons. For the first time since the invasion, humans had a real advantage in combat. The Council guards were completely unprepared for humans who could resist their mind control technology. Adams and his team moved through the station like ghosts, striking fast and disappearing before the aliens could respond. Within an hour, they had reached the detention levels where the human prisoners were being held. "Amy, are you in there?" Adams called through the heavy door of the main prison cell. "Steve, is that really you?" came Amy's voice from inside. "We thought you were all dead." "Not yet," Adams replied as his engineers worked to break through the alien locks. "But we need to move fast." The rescue was going perfectly until Dr. Carl Bennett made an incredible discovery. While the soldiers were freeing prisoners, Carl had accessed the station's main computer system using codes that Nick had provided. What he found in the Council database was beyond anything they had hoped for. "Jake, you need to see this immediately," Carl said over his radio. "I've found records of every species the Council has ever conquered. There are detailed files on their homeworlds, their technology, and their weaknesses. Can you download the files?" "I am trying, but there is too much data." "Jake, this database contains the complete history of Council expansion over the past 1,000 years. If we could get this information to the other conquered species," Jake understood immediately. The database did not just contain information about past conquests. It also had the communication frequencies and locations of every world under Council control. They could use this information to contact other enslaved species and coordinate a galaxy-wide rebellion. "How long do you need?" "At least 20 minutes to download everything." Jake looked at his watch. They had planned to be off the station in 15 minutes. Every extra second they stayed increased the risk of being trapped. But this information could be the key to defeating the Council forever. "You have your 20 minutes, Jake decided. "Adams, get our people to the ships. I will stay with Carl." The evacuation was chaotic but successful. Amy Foster and 15 other human prisoners were loaded onto the escape ships along with several alien allies who had been captured for helping the resistance. But as Carl worked to download the database, Council security forces were closing in on their position. 10 more minutes, Carl said as alien weapons fire echoed through the corridors. Outside, we may not have 10 more minutes, Jake replied while checking his weapon. The Council knows we are here. The battle for the computer center was fierce. Jake and a small team of soldiers held off waves of Council guards while Carl desperately tried to finish the download. The neural shielding devices gave the humans an advantage, but they were still outnumbered 50-1. Got it, Carl finally announced. The entire database is downloaded. Jake, we have everything we need to start a galactic revolution. They fought their way back to the docking bay where their ships were waiting. Several soldiers were wounded, but everyone made it aboard. As their small fleet pulled away from Nexus Station, Jake felt a mixture of relief and excitement. They had not only rescued their people, but gained intelligence that could change the course of the war. The real breakthrough came when Amy Foster began analyzing the communications frequencies in the stolen database. Working with Nick Torres, she was able to contact resistance groups on dozens of different worlds. What they learned was amazing. Jake, the Council has been lying about everything, Amy reported. They claim to rule hundreds of worlds, but most of their member species are actually prisoners just like us. There are active resistance movements on at least 40 planets. The plan that emerged from this discovery was bold beyond anything the human resistance had attempted before. Instead of just fighting for Earth, they would coordinate simultaneous uprisings across the entire galaxy. The Council had built their empire by conquering one world at a time. Now they would face rebellions everywhere at once. Nick Torres proved to be invaluable in organizing the galactic resistance. His knowledge of Council procedures and his contacts among other enslaved species made him the perfect coordinator. But Nick also revealed something else that gave the humans hope. The Council fears your species more than any other they have encountered, Nick told Jake during one of their planning sessions. I have seen their internal reports. They moved against Earth so quickly because they recognized that humans would become an existential threat to their empire if given time to develop. What makes humans so dangerous? Your adaptability, your creativity, and what the Council calls irrational persistence. Most species surrender when they face overwhelming odds. Humans keep fighting no matter how hopeless the situation becomes. This revelation spread quickly through the human resistance and had an amazing effect on morale. The Council had conquered Earth not because humans were weak, but because they were too dangerous to be left alone. This knowledge turned despair into determination. On Earth, the resistance was growing stronger every day. Sandra Price had used the materials from the mining raid to build hundreds of neural shielding devices. Resistance cells in major cities were starting to operate openly as more humans shook off the effects of Council mind control. Governor General Zekmar was becoming desperate. His daily reports to the Council showed that human resistance was growing instead of declining. Worse, the humans seemed to be communicating with resistance groups on other Council worlds. Sir, we are detecting unauthorized transmissions from multiple locations across the planet, his communications officer reported. The humans appear to be broadcasting on frequencies used by resistance movements throughout the galaxy. Zekmar felt the first real fear he had experienced since arriving on Earth. The Council's power depended on keeping conquered species isolated and hopeless. If the humans were helping other species coordinate their resistance, the entire Council empire could be at risk. The breaking point came when Amy Foster successfully broadcast the stolen Council database to resistance groups across the galaxy. The transmission revealed the truth about Council history and provided detailed information about their military capabilities and weaknesses. Within hours, uprisings began on 17 different worlds. The Drakmari, who had been defeated decades earlier, rose up again with new hope and better intelligence about their enemies. The Vorthan launched coordinated attacks on Council facilities throughout their system, even species that had been peaceful. Members of the Council for centuries began questioning their loyalty. "This is impossible," Chancellor Veltar declared during an emergency council session. "How did the humans obtain classified information about our operations? It appears they infiltrated Nexus Station and accessed our central database," War Master Thekanon reported. "The entire galaxy now knows the truth about our expansion methods. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Galaxy Council was facing a crisis it could not control. Their empire was built on deception and intimidation, but now their lies had been exposed. Worse, the human example was inspiring other species to fight back with a courage the Council had never seen before. The war that followed would determine whether the galaxy remained under Council control or became free for the first time in centuries. The final battle for Earth began on a cold morning in December when Colonel Steve Adams led 10,000 resistance fighters out of their mountain hideouts. For 8 months they had fought a guerrilla war against the Council occupation force, but now they were ready for something bigger. The time for hiding was over. Sandra Price had used the stolen Council technology to build weapons that could match alien firepower. Her engineers had worked day and night to create energy rifles and portable shields that gave human soldiers a fighting chance. More importantly, every resistance fighter wore a neural shielding device that made them immune to Council mind control. In the cities across Earth, millions of humans were waking up from their enforced sleep. The daily treatments that had kept them calm and obedient were no longer working. Dr. Carl Bennett's antidote was spreading through the water supply, and the population was remembering how to be angry. Governor General Zekmar watched from his headquarters in Geneva as human crowds gathered in the streets. At first the demonstrations were peaceful, but they quickly turned violent when Council soldiers tried to disperse them. For the first time since the invasion, humans were fighting back in large numbers. "Sir, we have reports of uprisings in every major city," his aide reported. "The human population is no longer responding to treatment. They appear to have developed immunity to our control methods." Zekmar felt panic rising in his chest. This was not supposed to happen. No species had ever broken free from Council mental conditioning. But humans were proving to be different from every other species the Council had encountered. High above Earth, the space battle was already raging. Admiral Kate Sullivan had gathered every human ship in the solar system for one final assault on the Council fleet. Her forces were still outnumbered, but they had advantages the aliens did not expect. "All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan," Kate broadcast to her fleet. "Today we fight not just for Earth, but for every enslaved world in the galaxy. Show the Council what happens when they threaten human freedom." The human ships attacked with desperate courage, using tactics that confused and frustrated the Council commanders. Instead of fighting in neat formations like civilized species, humans scattered and attacked from unexpected directions. Their ships were smaller and weaker, but they moved like angry hornets, striking fast and disappearing before the enemy could respond. Captain Jake Morrison commanded the lead squadron in the space battle, but his real mission was different. While the fleet kept the Council ships busy, Jake and a small team were heading for the Council command ship, where they planned to capture Chancellor Veltar himself. "Nick, are you sure about the ship's layout?" Jake asked his Altarian friend as they approached the massive Council vessel. "I served on ships like this for years," Nick replied. "The command center is heavily defended, but there is a maintenance shaft that leads directly there. If we can get inside, we might be able to take the Chancellor alive." The infiltration was the most dangerous mission of Jake's life. He and Nick crawled through narrow maintenance tunnels while the ship shook from weapons fire. Around them, the Council crew was fighting desperately to repel the human attack, but they had never faced an enemy that refused to give up. Jake could hear Chancellor Veltar's voice echoing through the ship's communication system. The Zephyrian leader was trying to rally his forces, but there was panic in his musical voice. For the first time in centuries, the Council was losing a major battle. "Human ships are breaking through our defensive lines," came reports from across the Council fleet. "They are using suicide tactics that our computers cannot predict." But the humans were not really using suicide tactics. They were using something the Council had never encountered before: the willingness to risk everything for freedom. Human pilots flew their damaged ships directly into Council vessels, knowing they might not survive, but also knowing their sacrifice would help others escape slavery. On the surface of Earth, the liberation was spreading like wildfire. Steve Adams and his mountain fighters had captured the Council garrison in Denver, while resistance cells in other cities were overrunning alien positions. The Council soldiers were well-trained and well-equipped, but they had never fought an entire population that refused to surrender. Amy Foster was coordinating communications between resistance groups around the world from a captured Council facility. Her equipment allowed her to monitor the global situation, and what she saw filled her with hope and pride. "Steve, we have confirmation from every continent," Amy reported. "London is free. Tokyo is free. Sydney is free. The Council has lost control of every major population center. But the real victory was happening in space, where something unprecedented was occurring. Ships from other enslaved worlds were arriving to join the battle against the Council fleet. The Drakmari had sent their remaining warships. The Vorthan contributed a squadron of fast attack craft. Even some former Council species were switching sides. "This is War Leader Kron of the Drakmari fleet," came a transmission on the human frequency. "We have waited 20 years for this day. Today we fight together for freedom." The sight of alien ships fighting alongside humans against their former masters was something no one had ever imagined. The Council had built their empire by keeping species isolated and suspicious of each other. But human determination was inspiring others to overcome centuries of fear and conditioning. Jake finally reached the command center, where Chancellor Veltar was trying to coordinate the defense of his crumbling empire. The elegant Zephyrian looked up in shock as Jake burst through the door with his weapon drawn. "Surrender now and order your forces to stand down," Jake demanded. Veltar looked around at his panicking staff and the displays showing Council defeats across the galaxy. His beautiful face was twisted with rage and disbelief. "This is impossible. You are a primitive species. You should be grateful for our guidance. We would rather be free and primitive than slaves in your perfect society," Jake replied. The final moment came when War Master Thekanon attempted to activate what the Council called their ultimate weapon. Hidden in the galactic core was a device that could destroy entire star systems. The Council had never used it before, but they were desperate enough to consider destroying Earth and every other rebellious world. But Dr. Carl Bennett and Nick Torres had anticipated this possibility. Working together, they had found a way to turn the Council's own weapon against them. Instead of destroying the rebel worlds, the device would target the Council's command structure throughout the galaxy. "You cannot do this," Veltar screamed as he watched his empire crumbling on the displays around him. "Without the Council, there will be chaos. Species will go to war with each other. The galaxy will burn." "Maybe," Jake admitted, "but it will be our chaos and our choice. That is what freedom means. The weapon fired, but not at Earth or the other rebel worlds." Across the Galaxy Council command centers and administrative facilities simply disappeared in flashes of energy. The empire that had ruled for 1,000 years was destroyed in a matter of minutes. The aftermath was everything Veltar had predicted and more. Some species did go to war with their neighbors. Others collapsed into internal conflicts. But many more began working together to build something better than the Council had ever offered. Earth became the center of a new organization called the Galactic Liberation Alliance. Instead of being ruled by a council of alien overlords, it was governed by representatives from every free species. Decisions were made by vote rather than decree, and no species was forced to obey laws they had not helped create. Jake Morrison was elected as the first human representative to the new galactic government. His office was located in the ruins of the old council chambers on what had once been Dominion Prime. Every day he looked out at construction crews from dozens of different species working together to build a better future. Amy Foster became the Alliance's chief communications officer. Her job was to make sure that no species ever again became isolated and vulnerable to conquest. The galaxy would remain connected and every world would know that they were not alone. Dr. Carl Bennett established the Galactic Medical Institute, where Doctors from every species worked together to share knowledge and develop new treatments. The mind control technology that the Council had used to enslave populations was now being used to help victims recover from trauma and addiction. Colonel Steve Adams founded the Alliance Defense Force, which was very different from the Council's military. Instead of being used to conquer new worlds, the ADF existed only to protect member species from external threats and help planets defend themselves. Sandra Price became the head of the Technology Sharing Council, which made sure that advanced knowledge was available to all species rather than being hoarded by a ruling elite. Under her leadership, scientific progress accelerated faster than it ever had under Council rule. Nick Torres was appointed as the first director of interspecies relations. His job was to help former Council species adjust to freedom and learn to cooperate as equals rather than rulers and subjects. The new galaxy was not perfect. There were conflicts and disagreements, and sometimes species made bad decisions. But it was free, and that made all the difference. The final scene of humanity's greatest adventure took place 5 years after the liberation. Children from dozens of different species were playing.